Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Blindspot. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we pick up at the beginning where you had that team of mercenaries that Madeline hired. It turns out they ended up kind of figuring out exactly how the squad broke into that CIA black site, and then to do that with her, I was like, hey, I could be mistaken, but isn't that the dude from Banshee? I wanted, he popped up a little bit in season 4, but he's mainly in season 3. He's the dude that, spoilers for Banshee, he kidnapped Job at the end of season 3, if I remember correctly. It's that dude, which is interesting because there's a lot of Banshee related stuff all over the place because of the fact of the matter is, let's not forget Tristy Kelly Dunn, who played Siobhan in Banshee, is, in this, she plays Allie in the show. So it's just interesting when you really break that out. And even obviously the actor who plays Kurt, he was on Strike Back, which was on Cinemax, which Banshee was also on Cinemax. Once again, running too deeply about degrees of separation and stuff like that. It's just how my brain works. Regardless. So now it turns into a situation of later on we find out they're really good because we find out later on Show is dead. They're and then Rich is just because Show's dead, it doesn't mean anything. Plenty of people wanted Show dead. And it's his hand got cut off. Oh, yeah, that's super about us. Because obviously they're trying to figure out, what do we do? It's there's that phone that Rich had left behind. We could get to it. It has all of Madeline's plans. We can stop her and clear our names. But getting to that phone, hell, stepping on U.S. soil right now is not an option. But it's who can we get to do it? We can get Whites to do it. Obviously, Rich is not too keen on the idea. It's we can't trust him. Even, Tasha's yeah, he helped out once, but that doesn't mean he'll do it again and that we can count on him. So it turns into a situation of what do we do? So it comes down to Jane and Jane, kind of taking the lead on everything. It's okay, so they got to meet Whites face to face and kind of look him in the eye and determine whether or not they can trust him or not. So they got to come up with this plan of how to meet with him. And because at the same time, Whites, everything at the, the FBI building and everything, Madeline's collecting phones. It's basically we're going to have access to your phone, your social medias, just because there's a whole bunch of leaks here and stuff like that. And I love Whites being I got this thing in Helsinki, I'm giving a speech, it's kind of pretty important. And then I even love him being you know what this speech is about how the U.S. law enforcement fighting for freedom around the world. He's ironic, isn't it? And then we also, I love who's sitting across from him. I'm hey, it's Brianna, which is interesting because it's I wonder, you would assume she knows about Reed because it's complicated because Reed actually gave her that second chance and everything. So it's interesting to see her there. But I even love later on where, you have Whites wanting to bring her into the fold, but Afreen is I don't think so. He's oh, I thought you guys were actually kind of buddy or something like that. But it's no, that's not the case. And I love it. It's well, because the fact of the matter is you're kind of on your own for the next 48 hours because I got to, hit up Helsinki. So, hold down the fort and everything like that. Because she was saying I'm kind of the only line of defense. Because obviously they're not looking for leakers. They're actually looking for the resistance. And I love that they have to call themselves the resistance and everything. But regardless, obviously this presents an opportunity to find Whites, to talk to Whites. So Kurt and Jane were going to go. But it's getting in won't be that easy, not putting their names on the list. I skipped over it by accident too. I should also talk about, I love obviously it's Rich wanted to make this place more of a home. He's we could put up some art, we could put up some, tasteful nudes here, and then a big one, right here, calling the place Archie and everything. Because it's oh, I didn't get into she was yeah, cause calling the bunker Archie. Oh, Archie bunker. Got it. But nevertheless, but then I have to go, okay, so we have to call on somebody to get this done. It's well, who? It's Patterson, a civilian. I was who the hell does she know? I was civilian. I was who can Tasha be talking about? And I'm yeah, we got Bill Nye, the science guy, for at least one more time before the end of the show. I was this is great. And him playing games and so on, and then he made a reference to something, and he's over the headset, explaining the reference he had made, and then Patterson kind of giving him like a message of being like, we need your help in Helsinki and stuff like that. And obviously it was painful for her because it's like it was only 30 seconds, and it's like this is a situation where they may never get to see their families. It's actually interesting when you actually break it down. Like a lot of this cast doesn't. I mean the cast as in the characters themselves. A lot of them don't really have a lot of family left. I mean, for Jane, the only family she has left is Avery. Which I don't know if they're really going to tie into that. Like she was completely absent from last season, but I'm curious they're going to tie anything into that. Maybe not. But obviously for Kurt, it's like, you know, his daughter, so it's like missing out on that. He still has a sister too. I'm about to say his mom and dad are gone. More so on the mom's side of things. If you feeling sad about obviously his dad being that whole thing, but for Patterson, it's like, oh yeah, like this might be the last time she gets to talk to her dad at all. And so Kurt and Jane had come to I guess because Jane isn't, you know, kind of leading everything. It's like they've made a decision that it's not Jane and Kurt, it's Kurt and Patterson that's going. So it's pretty cool. Also, side note, I'm just weird. Like I think Ashley Johnson looks really good in that black wig. I guess because I've always seen her as a blonde, because obviously she always looks very lovely just as a blonde anyway. But I feel like I might have seen her in the past with different hair colors, but I definitely at least I'm always associating her being blonde. So, you know, but regardless. So I was like, oh, that wig looks really good. And I don't know, like getting too into it. She just looked lovely, is all I'm saying. Also, like Kurt getting all grayed up and stuff. I like that. And even love Rich being like, oh, Kurt looks good in that hat. But having to work with, you know, Bill and everything. And it's also interesting because I think this also speaks volumes. You see that Kurt isn't fanboying out like he did before. I guess considering the circumstances, and I think that's kind of a neat thing. Like, because remember the last time, it's like, oh, my God, Mr. Like, you know, oh my God, it's Bill Nye the Science Guy. Oh my God, you know. So he was fanboying out last time, but I think this time because of the circumstances, like, yeah, we need to be focused. So I can't be nerding out because especially how important this is for Patterson and him. It's like this is the last time they might be able to see each other. There was even that adorable moment where he's like, yeah, here's some like voice messages I left for you. He's like, what? Too sappy, and she's like, no, great minds think alike, because she made one for him too. I'm like, the feels, it's so adorable and beautiful and like a, you know, nerdy science and smart person type of way, but it was super adorable. I was like, oh, that's super sweet. Also, that Rich is kind of like off his game because it's like, oh yeah, did you fill up the gas? And he's like, damn chore wheel, because Patterson made something which is essentially a chore wheel. She's like, no, basically she wants to give them something, you know, change up their patterns, because if it's something as random as that, it's less likely for an AI system to track them. So they were supposed to be doing stuff based on that, which she says it's not a chore wheel, but obviously it's just a chore wheel. But little hiccups, but they were able to kind of get through. And so it's like, okay, you need to tell Whites where to go. Bill goes over to White's and he's like, wait, Bill Nye, the science guy? He's like, yeah, you need to go to this dressing room. He's like, okay, thanks for the offer, Bill, but I'm gonna pass. He's like, no, friends of ours. He's like, wait, they've been here? It's like, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, because Bill was supposed to walk away, but then Home Dude catches him and is like, whoa, what are you doing? And he's like, whoa, it's I love White's being like, you do recognize who this is. This is Bill Nye the Science Guy. You know, what were you two talking about? It's like science stuff. You know who he is, right? And so it's like, he's like, oh yeah, the pacemaker. What about this thing in your ear? You want me to believe it's a hearing aid? He's like, huh? What'd you say? And then it's just like, okay, he's about to be grilled, and then he kind of puts on the front, and I wonder, is this just for this, or was this actually something like very true to Bill Nye the Science Guy, where he kind of went off on everyone? He's like, the thing you guys want to compare and contrast and act like we're not here dealing with the real heart of the issue, and that is global warming. Him kind of going off like that. It's kind of interesting because like, it's just something I've always heard, that Bill Nye, like, especially as he's gotten older, like, you know, obviously he was the science guy for kids, but now, like, you know, I am a respected scientist, so he kind of doesn't, like, deal with a lot of people's BS when it comes to science stuff. That's kind of what I've heard. And I don't know the guy personally, so, you know, I've not, you know, kept up with Bill Nye since I was a kid, you know, so I can't really comment on that, but I just think that's kind of an interesting thing, and part of me wonders, is that that was kind of supposed to be like, not just for the show, that might have been a little bit real, and, you know, it's just like, oh, like, this is a recording device, I'm recording all of this and stuff like that, is what he was talking about, and it's just like, he got enough of an uproar that Whites was able to slip away, and then you have Kurt and Patterson kind of grilling him, and he's like, really? You guys don't trust me after everything I've done for you? They're looking at him like, really, dude? You mean all the lying and betraying that you've done? I mean, let's not forget just the most recent stuff. Let's not forget that you were blackmailing Tasha closer to the, earlier days in the show, around season 1 and... Yeah, I think it was around season 1. No, season 1 or 2. No, it might have been season 2. Let's not forget you were blackmailing her around that time. So, like, don't act like, it ain't like this is your first time skating this, like, gray area. And him being apologetic, he's like, because they're like, yeah, you even threw Rich into CIA black site. He's like, I didn't know. I thought they just stole him and holding or something for a little while. He's like, I didn't expect him to do that. He's like, the fact is he was there being tortured. He's like, everything, tell him I'm sorry. Like, basically everything that went down was on me. So it turns into a situation of like, well, can they believe whites? Can they trust them? Because for him, it's like, it might be tougher. He's like, but you guys don't realize I've been changing. My thing has been more so about changing hearts and minds. He even talks about like, oh yeah, you will know someone else's heart and mind then change. It's like, you didn't change a friend's heart and mind. She was already set on helping the team. She went to you because she wanted to know if she could trust you. But I love how, he got to give it that politician spin and everything. So... But obviously it's like, well, everything that's going on at the office is like, well, he's like, I can't do anything about it because I'm in Helsinki. And if I give Bark orders about like, oh, cleaning the ducts and stuff like that, then like Madeline's going to take notice of that. So what do? They get a friend. And I thought was kind of adorable. It's like, well, how do we get her attention and stuff like that? It's like, what do we know about a friend? It's like, she's good at karaoke. She's pretty good at karaoke. She likes coffee. And and Richard's like, well, that's what happens, when we get all cliquey at work, that when the time comes, that you're on the run for being like a terrorist, stuff like that, and you don't know that much about your coworker, all you can say is, oh, she enjoys coffee. I just love that. And also love how it tied into a little bit of a thing of like, oh, how will you know that a friend will look into this? It's like, she's like, well, it's something David did for me. And I'm like, oh, David. Yeah, just kind of a little bit of like oh yeah, don't forget about that little, emotional button you can push whenever you need to. But at the same time, Brianna is being forced by Madeline, and Madeline being like, oh yeah, you're going to look into this. She's like, do I really have to? And I was like, oh yeah, for your parents' sake. Oh, where are they staying at? So it's like threatening her family. So it's like, and her kind of getting close to a friend and everything. And a friend, I think, kind of sees through it a little bit, but regardless. A friend does end up ultimately getting the phone, but then Brianna comes in and she's like, whoa, so, Rich usually comes, this is usually Rich's place, huh? And she's like, what? It is? I didn't know that. And it's like, okay, like, she's like, I have to because my friends, I have to because my family's in danger. She's threatening to kill my parents. But a friend reminds her, she references a specific attack that happened where basically like government officials had leaked the names of like Muslims that were hidden, and like basically they were tracked down, and even a friend was like, her family barely escaped, and she was like, I was 2 years old at the time. So it's kind of that thing of like, this is what you're doing right now. Like, the fact of the matter is, you, me, your parents, none of us are going to be safe if we don't help the team take Madeline down. And Brianna's like, you're not going to be able to just get out of here with that. Let me. And I was like, okay, like, that's the thing. I was like, is this going to be like for real, or is she lying, manipulate? I was like, what's going to happen here? So when the time comes though, there is a situation of they end up finding out that there's actually a bomb underneath the stage and everything. And I was like, wait, at first even I'm like, wait, is it supposed to kill? I was like, was this whole thing set up to kill whites? But then they bring up a good point. Why would she drag him all the way to Helsinki just to kill him? It's like, it'd be easier to make sure you have your eyes on the ball, in New York. So why? And it's like, it's not about him. It's about Susan, who was like, she's an advisor to the president, who's very, very vocal about her being against Madeline. So it's like, and Madeline takes a lot of shit personal. So it's like, especially when it comes to power plays and stuff like that, she's trying to worm her way up to the president. So like having someone kind of bad-mouthing you and second-guessing you, I'm sure it was a little, from a professional standpoint, I got to remove her so I can rise through the ranks. But also it's like, oh, she's talking mad shit. She's got to go. So with Madeline, you can guarantee it was both. It's just an interesting thing to think about. Just like shows you what kind of psychopath she is. And then the fact is, Rich has to let whites know, like, he needs to keep talking. And he loves it at one point in time. He's like, and he literally at one point, you can hear it during the like speech, because he goes on and on and on. He's like, something like some like it smooth, some like it chunky, kind of referencing Peanut. But I'm like, where the fuck are you going with this, Whites? Dude, you're all over the place with this. And then Bill coming to save the day when Patterson was kind of stuck holding up the bomb, and it's just kind of like, oh, like if because she's even telling dude, it's like, you shoot me, I drop this, and we both go boom. But he's like, oh, basically he's about to give that martyr speech of like, I'm ready to die for mine, but Bill knocks him out, and it's like, oh yeah, Bill came to save the day. And obviously the whole situation of like them figuring out how to end up stopping the bomb, because it like basically kind of acts on the same frequency. Well, the detonator at least acts on the same frequency as they're using for their communication, and why it keeps fritzing up the entire episode. I thought it was kind of neat. Luckily, Kurt ends up taking down the explosive, the guy that was actually going to detonate. And when that all ends up happening, because obviously Bill was like, I'm not going to go anywhere, because he's like, if you blow up, what am I going to say to your mom? But for him, it's also like, oh, this is kind of an exciting moment to be here just before, like the clock ticks down and kind of the buzzer goes off type of situation, like you see in like, like movies and TV shows like this situation. So, but luckily they were able to stop the bomb and everything. And Patterson and Bill get to have, their goodbyes, and we get it. The greatest mystery this show has ever created. We finally get an answer. What the hell is Patterson's name? And he's like, William. And she's like, oh, I don't like that. And he's like, it's your name. You get your last name from your mom, and you got your first name from me. I was like, oh, that's actually really sweet. Because they've been teasing that for a while now. Because like, I might have brought this up in my past reviews. I never really took much notice of the fact is we never got Patterson's name. Literally everyone else we know. Kurt Weller. I'm blanking on Jane's actual name now. Before Remy. But like Tasha Zapata, Edgar Reed. So it's like we got like everyone's name except for Patterson, because Patterson was always Patterson. I never thought too much about it until they start making bits about that. And then it's just kind of like, oh, you're William. And it's like, it's so interesting because like I made comparisons to Banshee earlier. That's actually kind of a thing in Banshee too. Like supposedly I remember reading this somewhere in the final episode of Banshee, you get to know Anthony Starr's character's real name. I think it's on probably one of the files. Alicia Dushku's character has. I butchered her name. I'm so sorry. Her character like has files on him and stuff like that. So it's just once again just deeper Banshee stuff I think is kind of fascinating. But what I love too is that when it's all said and done, we solved one mystery. There's still one more mystery we're never going to get to know. And Kurt's like, so what is your space camp name? Because she was like, you wouldn't dare call me by that, and telling her dad not to call her by that, and she's just like, shut up to Kurt, and they walk away. But I'm like, I love that we learned her name is William, but we immediately never. It's like, oh wait, there's another mystery that we probably will never get to find out the answer to. So I just like that being a little bit of a thing of like, oh, one answer, just another question, just to leave on it, just for a little, like a bit of a wink and nod, because I'm fairly certain they learned her name last season, because like it didn't come at like he's like, oh, your name's William. I think I remember them making a point of that, like everyone hearing Patterson's first name last season, but if I remember correctly, like I said, my memory is terrible, but nevertheless, sadly, the data upload didn't work out because Brianna ended up getting caught. Got disconnected before any data could go through. So they had to basically burn everything associated with that. The team did, or it would have backtracked to them, which obviously is upsetting for Kurt, because it's like, it was kind of supposed to be his Hail Mary, because it's like, he was telling the team not to get associated to this place just being home. I even love Rich being like, oh yeah, everyone came back. Yeah, everybody hugs. I guess for him it was also just kind of like, oh yeah, sure, everybody hug. You didn't come to me immediately to hug, but okay. But it turns out Kurt and Patterson have been blamed as kind of like the terrorist in this case, and the guy who was actually the detonator dude, he gets labeled as a hero. So even without them doing bad stuff, because once again I brought that up last episode, like, oh, maybe they'll have to cross the line and start doing some bad stuff. It's like, oh, Madeline's just gonna, like, it's gonna be like you're trying to do the right thing and you get labeled as a criminal. So it's probably gonna be a thing of that. No, we're doing heroic stuff, but Madeline's gonna paint it like you're bad guys. Tasha actually says she recognized the dude. She says a name that sounds familiar. I can't remember, like, the group she's referencing. I feel like I know it's come up in the show before. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe I'm confusing it with a different group, but was it Dovazan or something like that? Like, that name sounds so damn familiar, but I can't remember where. Like, I feel like it's something that's come up in the show. Like I said, not unless I'm crazy into something that hasn't come up before, but regardless, it is a situation. And I like what Jane was saying, because Kurt was like, I know what you're going to say. Like, I shouldn't have put basically all my eggs in one basket when it came to that phone. But it is a situation of, like, what do we do? Because it's like, you know, he's like, we're going to have to call this home forever. But obviously, you know, Jane was like, it's not going to be forever. She's like, eventually, like, we may never be FBI agents again. And that's something Kurt's probably is going to have to think about. Like, it might not be as clear cut when it's all said and done. If you do take Madeline down, who's to say it's all going to work out like that? And the fact of the matter is, we might even have new homes, but you will get to see your daughter again. Because he's afraid of, like, missing more birthdays and missing much more of her life and everything, you know? So that's just all a complicated thing. But I also like Tasha talking to Rich, because she could tell he was off the entire episode, and it turns out the reason why is because, I mean, he's literally fresh out of a CIA black site. So the reason why he wants to put up stuff to make it a little more homey and stuff like that, because if it doesn't feel like a home, it does feel more like a prison. That's why he was like, oh, it's kind of stuffy in here, no windows and stuff. It was very reminiscent of what it's just a constant reminder of the prison he was in, and so he wants to make it feel like anything other than a prison. So she brought him a poster and everything. I'm also curious just because of that, because it made me think of I'm about to call it Boston, because he does the whole art thing, and that's what makes me go like, oh, that could be an ally to turn to, because a lot of time obviously this team in Boston were on good enough terms. Obviously him and Rich were on better terms again and everything, so that could be an ally to end up turning to when the time comes. But he's a known associate, so things could get a little well, especially considering like Madeline already with the whole Boston situation anyway, so that kind of could be a lane that, I mean, that doesn't mean he still can't pop up, but it's just like it'd be a risky thing to go to him because he's a known associate, and even Madeline's used against him, you know, in the grand scheme of things. So, which, you know, is interesting, because what happened I thought was kind of fascinating was like the lady that works for Madeline is like, no, you don't actually have to get them out. All you have to do is get them transferred and we'll handle it. So I'm guessing like getting them out. She's like, yeah, you ended up getting a lot of my team arrested. So at the same time too, like Afrin and Whites are just kind of like, wait, where's Brianna? It's like, you know, did she turn on us? Either way, whether she turned on us or she didn't, which even Efren's like, I don't think she did. I think she got caught and she's disappeared. So it's like, what happened? Did Madeline throw her into a black site or like a deep hole or what? Or was she dead? Like, that begs the question. We do see at the very end, though, that Whites is being grabbed by her people and being like, oh, no, it's not an option, you're coming with us. I do want to end it on a little bit of an upper, you know, higher note. I thought was kind of interesting. There's that whole thing from Patterson's dad, you know, Bill, and that message he was leaving her. Basically, I'm already blanking on the word, but basically it's a word that basically meant a loved one, but it was much more. It was something that was stronger, because he even talked about the history behind it, and it was just, you know, how powerful of a word it was, and it kind of cuts between like everyone inside of, you know, the bunker and everything. I thought it was just a beautiful thing. And then he's like, okay, so now moving on to like, what about all the stuff that you're eating? Because he's like, you know, you gotta, some of that stuff is probably not nutrition. I was like, oh, being a dad, I was like, that was just super sweet. So I thought that was kind of a nice element to kind of bring to the season, especially after the heartbreak of, you know, Reed dying last episode. We need a little more uplift. I mean, granted, it's been 2 months for them. It's literally been only a week for us as the audience kind of dealing with that, you know? So it was kind of nice to kind of have some, you know, some happiness, some love, some like connection, some between loved ones type of situation, you know, in that regard. So I'm very interested to ultimately find out, you know, what it is that Madeline is planning on doing. Is she trying to rise her way to the top and then what? Like working with like a terrorist group like this? Is it just for the purpose of like, oh, I'm going to get to the top and by whatever means necessary? I mean, granted, this is about taking down this team because she knows it's going to take her A game to take down this team. But obviously, like, her team is pretty damn good themselves. So either way, I'm really interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.